Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Bobby Sylvester, joined as always by Mike Tagliere, and we're on Twitter at BobbyFantasyPro and at Mike Tagliere NFL. Tags, you have a fun weekend, maybe watching Brock Osweiler beat your Bears?
I knew you were going to bring that up, dude. I don't know. I don't know what your problem is, but
I mean, you could just come back and say my Jags just lost by 35 to the Cowboys.
Yeah, that was bad, man. Like there's a lot of things going on with that Jags team that are really concerning because like you knew once they had allowed like a touchdown or two that there was no coming back from that. And I actually asked on last night's podcast, I said, if there's anybody who can give me the stats, like has Blake Bortles ever come back from a game where he's been down 10 points, like ever? Because I think that the defense legitimately has lost all hope in him.
There's no way.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is just like I don't see that team going places if Blake Bortles can at least be competent and keep them in the game, or at least give them a short lead to work with. But yeah, that game yesterday was just pitiful on both sides of the ball.
You know what's funny? I'm like crossing my fingers here that the Raiders just say, okay, we're done with Derek Carr. We're going to draft a quarterback next year because maybe they'll have a top 5 pick or something. And Derek Carr goes to the Jags. Like, that's how desperate I am for a decent quarterback.
Yeah, it's pretty ugly, man. And I don't know what they're going to do. It's ugly.
So our guest today is Pat Fitzmaurice of thefootballgirl.com. Pat can be found on Twitter at Fitz_FF. Pat, thanks for taking the time to come on the show.
Guys, always happy to be with you. And I know it was a tough weekend for both of you with Bobby's Jaguars losing, Tag's Bears losing, and, you know, it was similarly depressing for me. My Milwaukee Brewers had a chance to go 2 games up in the NLCS. Didn't happen on Saturday, and then to rub salt in the wound, my Wisconsin Badgers got embarrassed on Saturday night.
Didn't it make you feel better watching the Bears get destroyed, though?
Not as much as you might think, but yeah, that was definitely an interesting end to the game. I'll say that much.
You guys are the worst.
Sorry, man. All right, guys. So here's what I have planned for today's show. There's some news to touch on. Then I've got a special segment planned before we dive into the waiver wire for most of the show. We're going to be going position by position. Then at the end, I'm hoping to go lightning round with some potentially droppable players. First, though, I want to talk to you all about one of the sponsors of today's show, Roman. Guys are terrible at taking care of their health. You know that. Whether it's a knee injury, bad back, or something worse, guys are usually more comfortable just rubbing some dirt on it than seeing the doctor. I'm guilty of this myself. That's why I have a torn Achilles. Right, I messed it up twice, and I didn't go to the doctor just thinking it would heal, and here we are. I'm in a boot. The same is true for erectile dysfunction. Studies show 70% of guys who experience ED don't get treated for it. Thankfully, Roman created an easy way to get checked out by a doctor and get treated for ED online. Roman's a one-stop shop where licensed U.S. physicians can diagnose ED and ship medication right to your door. With Roman, there's no waiting rooms, awkward face-to-face conversations, or uncomfortable trips to the pharmacy. You can handle everything discreetly online. All you have to do is visit GetRoman.com/fantasypros, fill out a brief medical onboarding, chat with a doctor, and get FDA-approved ED meds delivered to your door in discreet, unmarked packaging. Guys, go online, get checked out by a doctor. Erectile dysfunction is a problem that guys don't tackle, but with Roman, it's really easy, so take care of it. For a free online visit, go to GetRoman.com/fantasypros. That's GetRoman.com/fantasypros for a free online visit. GetRoman.com/fantasypros. Okay, guys, so we did have some news items to talk about. Not much in the way of injuries. In fact, this has been like the least injury-filled season, at least for stars, that I remember. There's no sign of Le'Veon Bell, though, so we do have to talk about this. We thought he was going to be back. Pat, what is happening? What do we do with Le'Veon Bell and James Conner?
Oh, man, this has just been a completely impossible situation to decipher, and I don't know if that has changed at all. So now we've got I think we're going to have value for James Conner the rest of the season. I don't think it's going to be like it was last year when Le'Veon Bell came back and immediately was handling 25 to 30 touches a game. I just don't think that the Steelers are going to have that same level of trust in him when he gets back this time. And knowing that they have to plan for a future without him, I think they keep Conner involved. So it's not as if Conner's value totally disintegrates upon Bell's return. As for Le'Veon, I mean, I think he's still going to be a running back one, of course, once he finally is back, if indeed he does come back at some point and, gets maybe a week or two to shake the rust off. So hopefully by the fantasy playoffs for the people who have been sitting on him. But, as far as those monster 25 carry, 6 catch games, I don't know if we're going to see those, even towards the end of the season after he's had a few weeks to knock off rust.
Tags, at this point, it seems more likely that Amari Cooper is going to be traded. Now, he's injured right now, so who knows if a team's going to go out and trade for him, but the Raiders certainly aren't using him.
No, well, they're not using him, but he was hurt. That's the thing, is I got multiple tweets on my timeline yesterday, talking about Amari Cooper and saying he didn't produce again, Mike. And I'm like, well, guys, I don't know if you missed the game, but he was knocked out very...
He got hurt in the first quarter.
Yeah, very, very early in the game in the first quarter. So he was never going to produce, obviously, in that game if he's not playing in it. So that's something. It's something to keep an eye on, though, to see what team he goes to if he is traded. Apparently, they're shopping safety Carl Joseph, a former first-round pick, and then they're shopping Cooper. They said it's not as strongly as they are Joseph, but the fact that they're willing to listen to offers is enticing. Like talking about teams like the Eagles, they don't have much cap room right now, so I don't know if that's possible because Amari Cooper's contract is quite hefty. But there's a lot of teams out there that can use some wide receiver help right now, and someone that can use Amari Cooper more than he's been used to this point. If you're in a dynasty format, I think that this is a sign that you should trade for Amari Cooper before his value increases, because legitimately, I mean,
almost anywhere is better except for Buffalo, which I mentioned on Twitter, but
I mean, if he goes to the Bills, I'm not going to upgrade him very much.
You would still upgrade him? I would not.
I mean, I probably would, just because, I don't know if Josh Allen's going to be there, the solution at quarterback. I don't know if he's going to be the long-term answer for them. It seems like they're going to be tied to him. I don't want him to go there. But I mean, I don't think he would see just one target a game if he went there, and that's something that's happened with the Raiders all too often.
I'd like to see him go to the Jags, man. I'm not just saying that because I'm a fan or anything, but they've got 3 decent wide receivers. They need a playmaker, man, with Fournette out. It is so obvious they have nobody.
But then he goes to Bortles, and it's just more inconsistency like Derek Carr, and it's maddening for sure.
Allen Robinson was fine with Bortles. Amari Cooper is just as talented as Allen Robinson.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there.
Guys, what about the Browns as a potential trading partner? They have draft capital and they have a major need at wide receiver.
With Mayfield, seriously, that would be a dream come true for me. I'm probably gonna have a dream about that tonight.
You would become a Browns fan immediately, wouldn't you, Tegs?
I kind of already am in a way. I'm like a closet Browns fan because I'm a huge Mayfield fan. I really hate that they traded away Josh Gordon because I was rooting for him to there's a comeback story. So I really do think they need to get him a legit number 1 receiver because Jarvis Landry is just not cutting it. And I mean, he's still a good receiver. I'm not saying that Jarvis Landry's not, but he's not suited for an alpha role. He's never going to be that guy. He shouldn't be seeing those 12 to 15 targets per game. They need an alpha wide receiver there. And fortunately, even if they don't trade for Amari Cooper, they're going to add a wide receiver at some point.
All right, guys, a couple other injuries. Calvin Ridley, his MRI actually just came back clean, so his ankle isn't really any kind of worry. Mohamed Sanu hurt his hip. Quincy Enunwa, it looks like he's going to be out for a couple weeks. And then Baker Mayfield, I imagine he's going to play, but he was probably the top streamer heading into this, but now he has the injury. Is he still your top streamer, Pat, for this week?
I don't know if he is necessarily. I mean, is Mayfield available in enough leagues for him to be a top streamer? I know in most of my leagues he's owned, and in CBS leagues, I'm doing waiver wire stuff for CBS Sportsline. He is owned in the vast majority of leagues. So I was thinking more along the Joe Flacco, Mitch Trubisky lines for this week. I don't know that there's anyone who's just widely available who's got a totally peach matchup. Certainly Mayfield against Tampa is tempting, but among the less widely owned guys, I would say it's Flacco against the Saints, probably.
Yeah. I like Trubisky as well. Those two are really close. But yeah, Mayfield is 42% owned on Yahoo. On CBS, like you mentioned, it's over 50%. Tags, we'll talk about quarterbacks later and get who your favorite streamer is. But first, I do have a new segment for us to go through. It is called Fact or Fiction. I'm sure you guys understand what this is. I'm just going to give you a nugget, and you guys tell me whether or not it is fact or fiction. Adam Theilen is going to finish the year as a top 3 fantasy receiver. Pat, fact or fiction?
I'll say fact because he's got such a good head start. I don't think that's going to change. He's got Steph Diggs drawing coverage away from him a little bit, so he doesn't have to worry about defenses, doubling him or shadowing him with top cornerbacks. I'll say fact.
I also will say fact on this, and I've recently been coming around on Thielen. I moved him up to my number 6 receiver for the rest of the season, but I have a feeling I'm just too low on him there. Like as you mentioned, with Stephon Diggs there, people have argued with me about this and saying that Stephon Diggs, if you think he's more talented, why isn't he producing more? Because playing in the slot gives you a certain benefit, and I did a study this offseason. I talked about it, and the slot targets are worth a lot more in fantasy football over the course of a season than perimeter targets. So to know that Thielen is playing the majority of his snaps out of the slot, to know that he's now on pace for 216 targets This is maddening. Like there's no way that you can deny it. And the crazy part is that I was just going through his matchup this week. They're playing the Jets, and Buster Skrine has been out for a few weeks, which means Perry Nickerson, he's a 6th round rookie cornerback who has not been particularly good in coverage, is going to be asked to defend Adam Theilen. So I don't see this train stopping anytime soon. Adam Theilen, I say fact, he is going to finish as top 3 wide receiver.
Guys, he's got 32 more targets than Michael Thomas.
It's nuts, man.
He's just getting the ball so much. I'm going fact as well. It's not that I have him ranked wide receiver 3 rest of the season. I think he's at 6 or 7 for me, but he's got such a big lead. I mean, he's got a 21-point lead on Brown, Hopkins. Tyreek Hill's right behind him. I don't think he's going to pass Thielen. I would say Brown and Hopkins probably pass him, but Julio Jones would have to get an extra 30 points to pass him rest of the season. That's a tall task. I'm not betting on it.
Yeah, I think Julio's in for some positive touchdown regression coming, because it's like you have 707 yards, like with 69 targets through the season. Like Julio Jones rightfully should have like 5 touchdowns already. So would it shock me over the next 2 games that Julio Jones on his next 15 targets, he scores 3 touchdowns? No, it really wouldn't. So you're going to see him jump up. I think he offers a solid floor regardless. And you're going to see some of those touchdowns come back. It's like, this doesn't happen, guys. Like looking down the fantasy leaderboard, in terms of PPR scoring, there's no other wide receiver in the top 50 who does not have a touchdown, but yet Julio Jones somehow is still the number 5 fantasy receiver despite not scoring. You have to go all the way down to wide receiver 64, Danny Amendola, to find the first wide receiver without a touchdown.
All right, guys, fact or fiction? Josh Gordon will be a top 24 wide receiver rest of the season.
Fact.
I'm going to say fiction, although I would have been much more confident in that call before last night's. Gordon owners had to be enthusiastic about what they saw last night and the amount of times that Tom Brady was looking his way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he led the team in targets. He was on the field almost the whole night. Tom Brady's posting about him on Instagram. I don't know if anyone buys that, but it's weird that Tom Brady's like posting weird pictures on Instagram. Does anyone else find that strange? It's got to be someone else like doing that for him.
No, it's probably Brady. They have apparently they have a locker room next to each other, and Chris Hogan led the team in snaps last week, and then this week it came to him. He was 3rd behind both Edelman and Gordon. Edelman is who he is at this point. You know, we've seen Julian Edelman before. I think the best finish he's ever had in fantasy was like wide receiver 18. So it's not like he's going to be a wide receiver 1. There's going to be someone who's going to produce in this offense. Rob Gronkowski, he looks clunky out there, man. Like he just looks like a tight end whose body just hasn't aged very well. He's still great. Like, don't get me wrong, but he's very clunky out there. Eventually the run game is going to slow down and you're going to see it funnel into these wide receivers. So Josh Gordon, the fact that Tom Brady's willing to throw it up to him when he's in one-on-one coverage, he's going to see that an awful lot. And Josh Gordon, more often than not, is going to come down with those balls.
I agree. I've got him wide receiver 19 rest of the season. I mean, remember, he would have caught a touchdown if it wasn't for that blatant pass interference last night, too. I think everyone would be going a lot crazier for him. He's not a superstar anymore. I don't think he's ever going to be a superstar. His body's just not the same as it once was. This is still a very good receiver in Tom Brady's offense. So I'll buy that one. And the final one here, fact or fiction, Sony Michel will be a first-round fantasy draft pick next year.
I'm going to say fiction just because he does not do enough in the passing game. He's not going to have that well-rounded profile that I think people are going to be looking for next year. So I think definitely squarely in the 2nd round, but not a first-rounder.
That's an interesting question, Bobby, and one that I'd be curious to see like a poll on this one to see what people think, because I'm of the mindset where I don't think that Tom Brady plays next year. And if Tom Brady leaves this offense, everyone devalues. And because of that, with that built into it, I'm going to say that it is fiction, that he will not be a first-round pick next year. This offensive line does need to be rebuilt quite a bit. They have to draft a quarterback. Once Brady leaves, this team is going through a lot of changes. And honestly, from what it sounds like to me, every Rob Gronkowski interview that I've seen, it sounds like he's going to retire with Tom Brady, and that there's like real truth to that, because he basically said, I'm playing with Brady. He's my quarterback, and that's the only quarterback I'm playing with. And that's why he turned down a trade to the Lions.
I'm looking at all the running backs I would draft ahead of him. Gurley, Barkley, Gordon, Zeke, Kamara, probably David Johnson if they work on their offensive line, Joe Mixon, maybe Christian McCaffrey, James Conner if Le'Veon Bell leaves, Le'Veon Bell himself. I don't know if Sony Michel will be an RB1 for me next year, but he's been playing really well lately.
Oh, yeah, he has. Yes, and James White's been playing really well, too. Those two complement each other extremely well, and that's the weird part. Pat, you mentioned it, that Sony Michel hasn't been used in the passing game, but that's the thing. He's a very good pass-catching running back. They're just not using him in that role, so if they ever need to or if they ever want to, he can do that. He's a good pass protector. He can stay on field for all 3 downs. Like, that's one of the reasons I loved him coming out of the draft, is because he is a 3-down back.
I've been really impressed with him. He looks awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, we're going to get to the waiver wire in just a second, but first I want to remind you all that we've got a new YouTube channel. If you haven't checked it out yet, youtube.com/fantasypros. Tags and I do 3 live streams through the week. We do a waiver wire show, we do a start-sit show, and then Tags does late injury stuff on Sunday mornings, answers a bunch of start-sit questions on Sunday mornings. We also do other videos that are like 3-4 minutes long just to give you the top information that we have to offer to you. Again, that's youtube.com/fantasypros. Guys, let's start at the running back position with the waiver wire. And a lot of people are going to say, oh, man, Latavius Murray had this big game. Dalvin Cook's coming back, right? Right? He's coming back.
Pat, what do you make of this backfield?
Yeah, he has to eventually, and it seems like they're playing it cautious with him. So, there hasn't been any sort of aggravation yet, which means he probably can be expected to come back at something close to full health whenever he does come back. I would bet that it's going to be this coming week. So, that pushes Murray down the list for me. And plus, there have been 2 games now where we haven't had Dalvin Cook at all. And the first one was just a colossal disappointment for Latavius Murray owners. And then, yesterday he finally did smash. Well,
it was against the Cardinals, so what did we expect?
Yeah, so, and the other thing, I mean, they did smash the Cardinals, but for the most part, this Vikings offensive line has been kind of a disappointment. So it's going to be hard for him to have standalone value once Cook is back, which just sort of drives down my interest in Murray as a waiver wire ad this week.
Tags, where do you have Murray? I've got him as my number 2 waiver wire pickup, but I wouldn't spend any fab on him.
No, I have him as my number 7 waiver wire pickup. I believe he's just a handcuff. And I shouldn't say just a handcuff, because I do believe even when Dalvin Cook comes back, I think that Latavius Murray has walked his way into a timeshare. Like, Dalvin Cook is never going to be the workhorse running back that people expected him to be when he was drafted. I don't think that there's a game this year that he sees 20 touches. I think that they legitimately understand after the torn ACL, after this hamstring injury that's had him in and out of the lineup, in and out of practice, they're slowly coming around to the idea that he's just not going to be a workhorse for them, and they're going to have, a dual back approach. And Latavius Murray might be the better 1-2 down back for them. He's more of a downhill runner, whereas Cook is the better pass catcher. So Latavius Murray, he's going to offer you like RB4 value even with Dalvin Cook in the lineup, but it's not great. I mean, they scored their first rushing touchdown last week in a matchup against the Cardinals, who had allowed 9 running back touchdowns coming into that game. So how much can we really take away from that? This is a throw first team. I'm not really that interested in Latavius Murray outside of a couple bucks for a fab signing.
I think he's Alfred Morris. But I would take Alfred Morris above anyone else available except for Peyton Barber, who's my number 1 fantasy pickup. It's not that he's great, has a huge upside. He's probably going to have the job stolen eventually, but he's pretty clearly still the starting running back for the Bucs, and you just don't find that every week. So I'd spend, 8-9 fab bucks on him. He's my number 1 overall waiver wire pickup this week. Pat, is the same true for you?
Yeah, he is my number 1 at running back, Bobby, and, he was definitely sort of scaring anyone who was thinking about investing in him. Just, it seemed like his grip on the job was loosening, but he really tightened that grip yesterday, we saw, and we saw him be effective both as a pass catcher and as a runner. So very encouraging. Granted, it was against a pretty shaky Falcons defense, but I do think he's probably the best bet among the widely available running backs, and he is number 2 to me overall, only behind teammate O.J. Howard, who I think has, I know we're going to talk about him later, but in a post-apocalyptic scene at tight end this year, I think, Howard just offers the most overall value of the guys owned in less than 50% of leagues.
Can you believe he's available? I've got him as my number 2 guy. Tags, do you have Jones and Howard 1 and 2 or 2 and 1?
Yeah, I have O.J. Howard as my number 1 pickup, and the reason I have him there is just because it's so hard to find a tight end with his skill set available on the waiver wire the majority of weeks. And it's crazy to think that people dropped him just because they heard he was going to be out for 2 to 4 weeks. I mean, I would have rather dropped Evan Ingram than I would have dropped O.J. Howard, to be honest with you. O.J. Howard was playing like 65 to 75% of the snaps before he got hurt. And then they had talked about it, saying that there was no guarantee that he was going to miss more than 1 game. He didn't even miss that. And like in his first game back in the lineup, I was like, okay, they're going to ease him back into action. They're not going to push him in. He played 34 snaps, I believe, while Cameron Brate played like 23. So he walked right back into almost a full-time role, the one that he was playing before, knowing that this defense is so terrible, knowing that O.J. Howard is a physical freak. He's in his sophomore season, and the Bucs clearly see him as a breakout candidate. It's not often you could find a tight end who could score a 75-yard touchdown after the catch. And O.J. Howard's that guy. He's an every week tight end 1. So he's someone that I would definitely, I'd be willing to spend 20 fab bucks on him. And honestly, if you're tight end needy and if your league, there's not much tight ends on the wire for you to stream, I'd be okay with even more than that. I just think that it's rare to find someone like O.J. Howard on the waiver wire at tight end.
I disagree with everyone here. I think that there's 15 fantasy tight ends that I'd feel comfortable with. And that number was a lot lower earlier in the season, but we've seen a lot of guys emerge. Austin Hooper, I'd be fine with him. David Njoku, yeah, he's the man. Jared Cook, he's not great, but he wouldn't be the worst case scenario. Kyle Rudolph is 96% owned. He's probably my tight end 13 or 14, guys. So I'm not going out of my way to spend big bucks on O.J. Howard. I think you'll be able to get one of these guys, whether it's Ingram, who's out there, or David Njoku, still available in a lot of leagues, if you can believe it. Austin Hooper available in 35% of leagues. I like O.J. Howard, but I'm not going to spend big fat bucks on him.
Austin Hooper's had 2 really, really good matchups. Like the Steelers and the Bucs are arguably the 2 worst defenses in the NFL against tight ends. And I think he took advantage of those matchups. I don't think Austin Hooper's an every week tight end 1, though.
So, Tags, what do you think about Peyton Barber and Ronald Jones?
I have them both as number 2 and 3 pickups because, like, I believe that Ronald Jones is going to be available on the waiver wire in most leagues. People will probably drop him after they seen Peyton Barber got that job back. But again, it goes back to Peyton Barber. He had a great matchup against Atlanta, and I said on the live stream on Sunday morning, because like I was a big fan of Ronald Jones going into last week. It was in the primer. I was saying that if I knew that Ronald Jones was the starter, I'd rank him as an RB2 last week. But then it got closer to Sunday, and like we heard Dirk Cutter talking about Peyton Barber still being the starter, and I was like, it's hard for me not to say Peyton Barber's not a low-end RB2 this week because the Falcons just allow so many points to so many different positions. So Peyton Barber turned into a good play in fantasy football last week. I still think that Ronald Jones is going to get a shot at some point, and we're now entering the point of the fantasy season where these are the players you want to have on your bench. The guys who could potentially walk into 15 touches in a high-scoring offense at any given point. And Peyton Barber, he's just a guy. Again, I don't think they stick with him throughout the rest of the season, but he's going to have value for you right now. So I like them both as pickups, to be honest with you. So I'm not going to pick one or the other because I think they both have value.
I like them both too, but like how much would you spend? Like 4 fab bucks? There's nothing exciting this week. I think a lot of people are going to say, well, he's the best available guy, so I'm going to go out and spend money so I can get the best available guy. Save that money for another week.
Yeah, this is a week where it's really tough. I think it depends on what your team needs. Like if you're a team sitting at 1-5 or 2-4 and you need wins now, I think Peyton Barber is somebody that you should probably consider spending maybe $10 on, just because like you need some production at the running back position if you really need it. If you're someone that's building for the future and like you're 4-2, 5-1, you could pick up Ronald Jones and just have him sit on your bench and waiting for his opportunity. There's a lot of players like that at the running back position that you could stash on your bench, like a Nick Chubb. We've talked about him. Latavius Murray's one of those type players. A lot of those guys require injuries in order to get a starting job, where Ronald Jones I don't think does.
Yeah. Anyone else at running back that you guys like this week? Maybe Duke Johnson, who finally got involved. Deontay Foreman, he's not coming back yet, but he will be back soon. I think that Lamar Miller could surrender that job. Rashad Penny got some touches. Ito Smith still there getting some touches. Frank Gore is technically the starter in Miami. Any of those guys you like, Pat?
Gore is my 3rd ranked overall player, and I'm figuring that a lot of people are hunting for immediate need this week on waivers with a 4-team bye week, the first 4-team bye week of the season. So, and Gore's got a really playable matchup this week against the Lions, who've been very vulnerable to the run this year so far. And I know it's not ideal in that Kenyon Drake is actually playing more snaps than Gore, but Gore is getting the bulk of the carries for the Dolphins, and he's averaging well over 4 yards per carry. he's limited. We know what Frank Gore is at this point, and it's not exciting. But as a 1 week Band-Aid, I think Gore can more than suffice if you have to plug him into a running back or a flex spot.
Tags, what do you think about that?
I'm just bored with Gore. I don't want to tie myself to a running back who's part of a low scoring offense. I know that they scored a bunch on the Bears this week, but it's still not an offense that's going to generate a whole bunch of fantasy points.
I don't mind winning though. Like if I can pick up Frank Gore and he's going to help me win, I'm cool with that.
Well, right, and that's the thing. It's kind of like Peyton Barber production with maybe not as much touchdown upside. So I'm not saying that he's a terrible pickup. I mean, I would probably rather have Duke Johnson just because I know, like looking at the schedule, looking at the matchup that they have this week against the Bucs have done really good against the run actually this year, where Carlos Hyde might have a third straight tough week in a row. Looking at the pass catchers that are available to Baker Mayfield, he's missing a lot of those guys, right? David Njoku should have a big week. Jarvis Landry should. I mean, he's been seeing the targets, but Duke Johnson slowly working his way into there, and he's a better 3-down back than Carlos Hyde. Like he's just someone that can offer more explosion in the run game, and I don't see why they haven't given him more opportunities. So it just depends on what you need. If you're looking for safety and you're looking for someone that gives you a high floor, I think Gore is fine. I think Peyton Barber's fine. They're similar players in terms of like what they can offer you. Whereas Duke Johnson is like, he's going to be a little bit more volatile, but he offers you more upside than those guys.
Let's say you've got Derrick Henry though, right? You drafted him in the 4th round. It obviously didn't work out. He hasn't been a top 40 fantasy running back once in 6 weeks. I would rather have Frank Gore than Derrick Henry right now.
It's hard to argue.
I would too.
It's hard to argue.
And I think the reason why the floor is higher with him, at least in the near term, until Tannehill gets back. I mean, letting Brock Osweiler throw 40 times a game is not a recipe for success for a game plan. So they need to establish that running game. And, Gore had a season high in carries this past week. I think he's been in double digits with carries the last 3 games. And whereas Duke, I think, has only touched the ball I don't think Duke has had more than 6 touches in any game this season. And, kind of a problem for him that he has had his role marginalized this year.
Yeah, he's mad too. I don't know if you've heard him talk about it, but why would he not be? He's, I think, the only player in NFL history that started his season with 3 straight 60 reception seasons as a running back.
Yeah, it's weird that Haley has not found a way to work him into that offense yet. I mean, he's a really good player, and we saw that, what he was able to do yesterday on just, 6 touches. So, hopefully that gets figured out, but I'm not sure I have faith in Todd Haley to, find a way to work Duke in to a level that makes him fantasy viable.
Yeah, by the way, I lied. He didn't have 3 straight 60-yard reception seasons at 61, 53, 74. So combined over 180, which is incredible for a running back to start his career. They got to use this guy. Drive me nuts.
It's really odd. Todd Haley talked about it before the season, saying that they're going to find the running back that has the most 3-down ability. And I was like, okay, well, I don't think Duke Johnson is the type of guy that's going to handle a big, giant workload, but he's someone that should definitely be involved in this passing game. And it just hasn't happened. I mean, fortunately under Mayfield, it's starting to expose itself a little bit. But yeah, this is a week where against Tampa Bay has allowed gobs of receiving yards to running backs. They've allowed 3 receiving touchdowns to them to this point. So, I mean, you kind of have to look forward and say, okay, if Carlos Hyde continues to struggle, how does this backfield shake out? They're not going to use Nick Chubb in the receiving game. So it's like Duke Johnson has to get on the field a little bit more. So this is like an anticipatory addition to your fantasy team, especially in like a PPR format.
So let's say you're playing in one of these more shallow leagues, or for whatever reason, the guy who owned Nyheim Hines cut him because he's like, oh, well, Marlon Mack's the starter now. So Hines is out there as a free agent. You've also got Corey Clement and Marlon Mack. Are all 3 of these pickups ahead of Peyton Barber, and how would you rank them? Pat, we'll let you go first.
I would put Corey Clement atop that list. Hines probably just behind him. I know that Hines' slow day yesterday is going to be attributed largely to the return of Mack, but I think he's still going to be involved every week as the primary pass catching back on a team that, is dealing with a lot of injuries to its pass catchers. T.Y. Hilton, Jack Doyle, now Ryan Grant, who I guess got banged up yesterday. So, as long as a couple of those guys are out of the lineup, I mean, I think Hines is going to be in a good position every week or most weeks to get at least 5 or 6 catches. And, Clement, I know he had fewer touches than Wendell Smallwood last week, but, he was better with the touches he did get. Part of that might have been that it was his first game back from a quad injury, but I do think, he's going to be sort of 1A there. It's a Smallwoods 1B. And, it's the best offense of the offenses we're talking about, I think, as far as well-rounded, like a very well-rounded offense and, an excellent offensive line that can run block.
They said he was only going to play so many snaps, and that's what happened. He looked good in those snaps. You watch Corey Clement on tape, I think he's a very quality running back in the NFL. I think he's going to be just fine, probably get himself 15 touches per game. That's going to get the job done in this Philly offense. So I've got him number 1, Mac number 2, because I do think the Colts are going to put up some points, and Mac's pretty clearly their starting running back at this point now that he's finally healthy. I love Hines as well, though. I would spend 15 fab bucks to acquire Hines, and he's my number 3 of this group.
Wow. I think Hines moves down my board quite a bit. I think that they've gotten the use out of them that they wanted to. He's still going to be involved in the passing game, sure, but it's really helped the last few weeks that, they've had T.Y. Hilton out, that they've had Jack Doyle missing from the offense. There's just some options there that, are slowly going to start coming back to the offense. And then Marlon Mack brought something to that team that they haven't had all season. That there was electricity in that backfield. Like he has athletic ability to bounce a run outside and break something long, which is something that, Jordan Wilkins couldn't do. He was a very boring running back. Nyheim Hines is not built to carry the ball on first and second down. Robert Turbin got injured against the Jets, so he might miss some time. Marlon Mack is the clear-cut number 1 for me here. I think Corey Clement is very close. I mentioned last week that I preferred Clement over Wendell Smallwood, and I stand by that. I just think he's the better running back. He offers more in the passing game, which is where value in targets is to be found. The Eagles are not going to be a run the ball 30 times type of offense. So,
and if they are, it's going to be 15 here, 10 here, 5 there.
Wendell Smallwood for him to even see the field, he required injuries to Jay Ajayi, Corey Clement, and Darren Sproles. So I'm not, with Sproles coming back eventually, maybe, with them potentially trading for a running back, I just think that Corey Clement's role is solidified, whereas Wendell Smallwood's is more like on the rocks. So I still like Clement. I don't think I'd put Hines ahead of someone like Peyton Barber or Ronald Jones, unfortunately.
All right, guys, we'll get to wide receivers here in just a second, but first I want to talk to you all about Leesa Mattresses. So I've got the Achilles injury, and it's frankly just hard to sleep with it. But when I sleep on this mattress, guys, I go to sleep in like 4 minutes or less every single night, no matter what, even like when I'm super sick. A quality night's sleep helps you recover from distractions faster, prevents burnouts, make better decisions, improve your memory, and overall just make fewer mistakes. It's not marketing, it's just science. To design a better mattress, Leesa leveraged 30-plus years of experience and hundreds of hours of testing to develop the perfect mattress for all body shapes and sleeping styles. Leesa's mission is to provide a better night's sleep for everybody, and through their 110 program, they donate 1 mattress for every 10 they sell. That's more than 26,000 mattresses and counting. Leesa strives to leave the world a better place than they found it, but that doesn't stop with mattress donations. Together with the Arbor Day Foundation, Leesa plants 1 tree for every mattress they sell, and they're committed to planting 1 million trees by 2025. Don't miss these fall savings. Get $160 off a Leesa mattress at leesa.com/fantasypros. Again, that's leesa.com/fantasypros. All right, guys, on over to Waiver Wire, and it gets a little more exciting here. I mean, I'm still not spending any more than $5 on anybody, but my number 1 guy is probably different than all yours. I've got Tre'Quan Smith up there because I think that he's the number 2 in this offense moving forward. I've been raving about him all preseason. Finally, right before the bye, he was on the field for 67% of the snaps after being on for 29% of the snaps over the first 4 weeks. I think he's going to be the real deal in the second half of the season. Pat, what do you think?
Yeah, he is number 2 on my list, but it kind of depends on what you're looking for. If you are looking for a high upside play, if you're looking for a guy who can immediately give you production. The 3 guys I had a real hard time sorting out this week were Tre'Quan Smith, Taylor Gabriel, and Cortland Sutton. And maybe you guys would question whether Sutton belongs there, but to me, he just kind of has that, I don't know, he's emitting that Kenny Golladay vibe from last year.
Yeah, he's Alshon Jeffrey. He is really good. He just needs to be on the field.
Yeah, I mean, his catch percentage right now is not good. His catch rate, I think, is like under 40%. So he's got Zay Jones laughing at his catch rate right now. But, the catches he does make, though, he looks so athletic and acrobatic with some of these.
And he's super agile, too. He's just a special type of athlete.
And big, with Demaryius sort of looking to be on his last legs here. And, Sanders is clearly the number 1 receiver but even now Sutton is playing like 3/4 of the snaps. Like he's a staple in 3 wide receiver sets for the Broncos. And, the opportunities there. But, yeah, like Gabriel has played such a bigger role in Matt Nagy's offense than I was anticipating. So it's kind of hard to knock him or what he's done. And even with Anthony Miller coming back last Sunday, Gabriel was still really heavily involved. So I think those three are all interesting targets. And, Tre'Quan, massive upside in the Saints offense, but that is just a tricky target tree there with, Michael Thomas, the two running backs, and then you've got, Ted Ginn, who was out last week, partially allowing Tre'Quan to shine. Cameron Meredith, I know Tre'Quan outsnapped him, but, Meredith is going to be a part of that offense too. So a little messy from a target perspective, but, if you're going to have a guy in a messy situation, you want him in a situation like New Orleans when there's going to be a lot of offense to go around.
I think that's a really good way to put it because, I'm thinking of Tre'Quan as a long-term solution. I don't think I'd play him against Baltimore, Minnesota, the Rams in weeks 7, 8, 9, but I'm looking at his schedule from week 11 on. The Eagles, the Falcons, the Bucks, the Panthers, the Steelers. I want Tre'Quan Smith in those weeks. Tags, what do you think?
Well, that's the thing is, I think Pat is just saying that basically it depends on what you're looking for in your team. If you're looking for a guy to stash in your bench that could potentially turn into something, Tre'Quan Smith is an excellent acquisition. But if you're playing in a standard 12-man league and you only have 6 bench spots, I don't think he's worth it quite yet. Now, the thing is, it's funny, in the Fantasy Pros podcast listener league that I host, I actually told the guys in there, I picked up Tre'Quan Smith off the waiver wire 2 weeks ago, and I told them, I'm like, hey, in your other leagues, go pick up Tre'Quan Smith. He's going to be a player. And while I still believe that he's going to be at some point, you have to understand that, this team is going to go back to their running ways. Their defense has been playing a lot better as of late. They looked really good against Alex Smith, and Alex Smith justifiably looked bad in his own right. But they've been playing better defense. They got Mark Ingram back. I think Drew Brees is slowly going to become like a mix in between of what you saw in 2017, where he was just a high-end QB2 most of the time, and then mixed in with a little bit more pass catchers this year. So he might take a step into, I think what I'm trying to say is that Drew Brees, I think, is a sell high in fantasy football right now because I don't think the attempts are going to be there the way that they were over the first 4 weeks of the season.
Yeah, Andy doesn't play in the red zone.
Exactly. They're about to play the Ravens on the road, and that's a tough matchup for any quarterback, including Drew Brees. So it's I think if people pick up Tre'Quan Smith this week, I believe that they're going to end up dropping him after he disappoints against the Ravens. And then you might be able to swoop in. Once your bye weeks are done, he's the type of player I love having on my bench. But the Taylor Gabriel conversation is a really good one because he's seen at least 5 targets in every week since week 2. He's been very involved in the Bears offense. And
you think Anthony Miller's still going to be a thing, right? I do.
Miller played this week. And here's the thing is Miller and Trey Burton are over the middle of the field. Those two are going to compete for targets. Taylor Gabriel's role is completely different than those two in this offense, where they're going to use him on screen plays. They're going to use him on reverses. And they're also going to throw him the deep ball. Mitch Trubisky has trust in him. In one-on-one situations, Gabriel has been fantastic at winning contested catches down the sideline. So I love the way that they've been using him in the offense, and it's really difficult for a DB to hang with that guy for more than a couple seconds. So I like Taylor Gabriel. He's actually on my list as my number 1 receiver pickup this week. And like Pat said, though, it comes down to what you're looking for, right? If you need production this week, I think Gabriel's a fine play against the Patriots, but Cortland Sutton, love that call, Pat. Love it. He's a player for sure. I'm worried about, obviously a situation. He's competing with Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, so the production might not ever get there without injury. But if you're looking for someone for this week off the waiver wire, Willie Snead against his old team, a great play. Willie Snead has been so much better than people give him credit for. I think that there's been just one game all year where he's scored fewer than 11 PPR points. And going against the Saints, whose weakness is their slot cornerback because they lost Patrick Robinson a couple weeks ago, that's a position where Willie Snead can kind of go off this week. So he's someone, if you're looking for this week production, I like Willie Snead an awful lot.
I like Snead too. I like Gabriel. He's my number 4, but I've got 2 guys I'd rather have this week. Chester Rogers against Buffalo. I don't know if T.Y. Hilton's going to play, but if he doesn't, Chester Rogers is Andrew Luck's number 1. And then I know this is going to make you puke, Tags, but Terrell Pryor, because Quincy Enunwa was out, and Pryor, we already saw it last week against Indianapolis. He filled in as that possession receiver. Not a great matchup against the Vikings, but we're talking about someone who can also be their best red zone threat. He's a superb athlete. I don't mind picking up Pryor whatsoever this week.
I think Curse is the better receiver to pick up from the Jets.
Pat, what do you think?
I would rather have Curse too. I mean, I think he out-targeted and out-caught Pryor yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. And, Pryor's just, as Michael Salfino pointed out to me a couple weeks ago, Pryor tends to sulk when he's not involved and sort of telegraph that he's not involved in a play by just sort of not doing anything off the ball, off the snap, if he's, not a primary target. So, I'm not real enthusiastic about him. I love the Snead call tags. I mean, he's quietly on an 80 catch pace right now. Granted, he's only averaging like 11 yards a catch, so he's kind of a PPR specialist. But, I find him intriguing, and I like Bobby's calling Chester Rogers, especially if, Ryan Grant is in any sort of danger of not playing this week, because I saw that he left with some sort of injury yesterday. I am curious to get your takes, guys, on David Moore and Christian Kirk. I mean, I really want to like David Moore. I think he's good.
I love David Moore. I just don't think he's going to get the opportunities. He's played some these past 2 weeks, and because of that, he's caught 3 touchdowns. You watch him in the preseason, and you're like, man, how is this kid not starting somewhere? I thought he was going to steal a starting job, and maybe he will get involved, but they're passing the ball like 25 times a game, and they've got Doug Baldwin. I just don't think there's room for David Moore to really be anything.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, the Seahawks are trying to drag their offense back to the 1970s. And really, with even David Moore as this third receiver now, establishing himself in the offense, it's just he's doing a lot with the targets he's getting right now, but he's just not getting a lot of targets.
Tags, what do you think, Christian Kirk or David Moore?
Christian Kirk for sure. David Moore, so looking at the Seahawks, the snap counts this week, they had 5 wide receivers who played at least 22 snaps. Jerron Brown caught a touchdown. Brandon Marshall was on the field almost as much as David Moore was. So it's clearly Tyler Lockett and Doug Baldwin, the 2 options that are going to be somewhat consistent. Moore has relied on touchdowns recently. So yeah, he's definitely not someone I'm interested in, but Christian Kirk is definitely someone that I would think about picking up, because you look at him and Rosen, I don't know if I've mentioned on the show before, but Christian Kirk and Josh Rosen roomed together this offseason. So they developed a connection that's going to be like an Arizona stronghold. Like those 2 are like part of the franchise. Them 2 and David Johnson are like tied to the franchise. That's the core. And Christian Kirk, when targeting his wide receivers, Josh Rosen, his quarterback rating is 137.0 when targeting Christian Kirk. Larry Fitzgerald is all the way down at 46.4. So he's not getting much production out of any other wide receiver outside of Kirk. They played well, and now they're going to play the Broncos, who might be without a starting cornerback again. Last week they had to go to Tremaine Brock in place of Adam Jones, and we know that Bradley Roby hasn't been very good. So knowing that Chris Harris Jr. is probably going to be locked up with Larry Fitzgerald, it's kind of like the best matchup on the field. I'm not going to sit here and say that Christian Kirk is like anything better than like a wide receiver 4, but I think he's the best bet for production on that team outside of David Johnson. And, that's a Thursday night game. So if you want Kirk and if you want action on the Thursday night game, he's probably the wide receiver I'd most want to own from the Cardinals in that game.
He went 6 for 77 against the Vikings. I like Kirk's game. I just don't know how much juice this Cardinals offense has. Guys, I've got 7 wide receivers that I would actually spend fab bucks on this week. Now, it's only $4 for Tre'Quan Smith and then 2 for everybody else, but Rodgers, Gabriel, Sutton, Snead, Pryor, Kirk. It's not a bad crew of wide receivers.
No, it's definitely not. I think it's a good week for wide receivers. If you're searching for some like wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 production for bye weeks, my order specifically is Taylor Gabriel, Willie Snead, Christian Kirk, Chester Rogers, Cortland Sutton, and Tre'Quan Smith. But again, it does come down to where if you don't need wide receiver plays this week, you can stash someone like Tre'Quan Smith who could pay off dividends down the road. But Pat, we haven't talked about Albert Wilson. And I know there's going to be a lot of people listening that are like, wait, you guys didn't talk about Albert Wilson. Like, why wouldn't you pick him up? He definitely is playing, it seems like, over Devontae Parker right now. Devontae Parker was only targeted once against the Bears, and he was intercepted on that play. He didn't show much effort coming back to the ball. So what do you think of Albert Wilson?
Well, one, I think Ryan Tannehill and Brock Osweiler. That's kind of a limiting factor for him. And, the usage has been really weird and hard to predict with the Dolphins receivers so far. Like, I just can't feel good about starting any of them in any given week. Even Kenny Stills, who I thought was going to have a pretty good year this year. And when Kenny Stills couldn't get it done with Devontae Parker out of the lineup, now Parker's back, at least temporarily. And, you've still got Amendola getting targets occasionally, occasional looks for Jakeem Grant. So it's really kind of a confusing situation. And I do like that Wilson is really been efficient with his touches so far. I mean, he's averaging like something crazy, like 16 or more yards per catch, I think, and he's got 4 touchdowns. But, it's just hard to rely on that target load every week. And then, when those targets are coming from Brock Osweiler or Ryan Tannehill, you can't expect the value of those targets to be as high as they have been so far.
I've got him in the Scott Fish Bowl, and I've got him in the Fantasy Pros Dynasty Invitational League, and I haven't started him once. I can't ever trust Albert Wilson, and if you pick him up, it's going to be the same for you. You start him if you absolutely must, but hopefully you're not in that situation because he's like the wide receiver 55 rest of the season.
Yeah, no, Albert Wilson was always a best ball target for me. I don't own him in any redraft leagues, but in best ball, I own quite a few shares, so I've been happy with the production so far.
Same with like Cole Beasley, DJ Moore. Are any of these guys interesting to you, Pat?
Cole Beasley, maybe in a PPR league, just because it seems like he is now the guy that Dak Prescott is leaning on.
Yeah, 11 targets.
Yeah, 11 targets, and he's going to catch a high percentage of those too. The thing is, they're not going to be very high value targets. He's going to average around 10 yards a carry, if that. He's not going to score many touchdowns. So, he's sort of low nutritional PPR league filler, I guess. Boy, that's about it. I mean, I do like those guys at the top, but like DJ Moore committed a couple of turnovers yesterday. So just when he was starting to maybe get some traction, you have to worry about that. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, certainly got to watch, and a guy to covet in dynasty leagues. But, with Cobb and Allison working their way back from injuries, just don't know what the opportunities are going to look like. Josh Reynolds had maybe been interesting if, Cooper Kupp with the miraculous in-game comeback from what looked like it was going to be maybe a season-ending injury yesterday. So, just when it looked like Josh Reynolds was going to be a major thing on the waiver wires this week, now not anymore. So, I'm really, Tags mentioned his rankings. I've got it Gabriel, Tre'Quan, Cortland Sutton, David Moore, Christian Kirk, Willie Snead, Chester Rogers, and then not a lot of interest in anyone else. Maybe Tyrell Williams in a deeper league, just because it looks like, this Williams thing is ping-ponging back and forth between Mike and Tyrell.
He's got a chance every week to make a big play.
Yeah, so I think I'd rather own Tyrell at this point than Mike. Both of them are pretty spotty.
Tags, we already mentioned our quarterback plays. If you're streaming this week, do you go Baker Mayfield, Trubisky, Joe Flacco, maybe somebody else, Dak Prescott?
No, I'm not going to go to Dak and think that it happens again. Don't forget, it's just 1 week. We have to look at Dak's sample on the season. Here's a fun fact for you guys. It's crazy. I'm going to follow it through, so don't think that I'm not going to follow through on this because it's not like me being a homer. But here's a list of the quarterbacks who have posted a better quarterback rating than Mitch Trubisky this year. Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Matt Ryan, Patrick Mahomes, and Jared Goff. That's it. Okay? The list of quarterbacks that I'd rather own than Mitch Trubisky in fantasy is much longer than that. 18 quarterbacks to be exact. I have Trubisky as my number 19 quarterback rest of the season. And while some people are starting to come around and say that, that they're building the playbook around him and this and that, there's literally so many moments where you watch him and you're like, what were you thinking here, Mitch? There's moments that are special too, but the numbers are so much better than his play has been. But against New England, looking at that matchup, it's hard for me not to say that he's not a better streamer because he has been putting up the fantasy points. We know that he offers a solid floor with his rushing totals. We know that the Patriots, in 4 of their last 5 games, they've allowed at least 17.5 fantasy points to quarterbacks. So returning back home off that embarrassing loss, the defense should play better. Jordan Howard is struggling to get much done right now. They kind of have to move the ball through the air. So I think Mitch is close. Baker, it comes down to the matchup and how's his health, because I saw that play when he rolled his ankle and I was worried it was something much worse than that, but he came right back into the game. They said he's getting treatment on his ankle this week, so he hopes to be fine. I would play Baker over Mitch because I believe that the matchup is just, you can never pass up a matchup with the Tampa Bay defense. So I'm going to go Baker here, but I do want to see him practice in full and be completely ready for this game. But Trubisky is my number 2, and Flacco, I urge you guys to approach with caution because the Saints are not going to...
Yeah, they're not one of the worst secondaries in the NFL. They're just not.
And Breeze isn't going to throw for 400 yards this week and 4 touchdowns where there's going to be a bunch of garbage time or anything like that. I think this will be a lower scoring game than people think. And the Saints defense, as I mentioned earlier, they have been playing better recently. So I would probably try and stay away from Joe Flacco if possible.
By the way, everyone talks about how good of a runner Josh Allen is. Mitch Trubisky has more rushing yards. He's on pace for over 500 rushing yards, guys.
Yeah, he's a sneaky athlete. He was
not as many as Blake Bortles, but he's on pace for over 500.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, tight ends. I have him as number 2 overall. Both of you have him as number 1 overall. Let's say O.J. Howard's gone, though. He's owned in 45% of leagues. CJ Uzomah or Ricky Seals-Jones or maybe anyone else, Pat?
All right, well, if I need a guy for this week, I'm going with Uzomah. Since he is the only game in town now with Tyler Eifert on IR and Tyler Kroft also banged up, and this is an offense that uses its tight end. So I think the floor is pretty high for him, whereas Ricky Seals-Jones has been sort of all over the map this season. But the guy I would want if I did not have to play him immediately, who is now widely available, is Jack Doyle.
Good call, baby. Yes.
I mean, I can't believe how many people have dropped Jack Doyle. A guy who, when he comes back and is getting full snaps again, is going to be a tight end one.
I agree. I totally 100% agree with you. And, if you've got roster space to do it, I never advise owning 2 tight ends. You can do it right now with Jack Doyle because when he comes back, I don't know if Eric Ebron's going to go away necessarily, but I've got them both as tight end ones rest of the season.
With wide receiver production so spotty on that team, I think there's room for 2 tight ends to produce.
Tex, who would you rather have rest of the season, Jack Doyle or George Kittle?
Oh, Kittle. There's just not enough the thing is Beathard does not have enough targets to go around. And when you look at the tight end position, you want guaranteed targets, right?
Okay. What about Kyle Rudolph then? He's 96% owned. I'd rather have Doyle than Rudolph.
I would agree with you there. I think Kyle Rudolph is extremely overrated. But the thing is that's just goes to show how bad the tight end position is we still have to rank Rudolph as a top 12 tight end just because it's so bad at the position. But he legitimately ranks 20th among tight ends in target share. And so Kirk Cousins, his pass attempts dipping over the last 2 weeks. As the Vikings defense gets back on track and they start getting better, he's the one who's going to suffer. So I would rather have Jack Doyle because at least we know Doyle Andrew Luck's not going to stop throwing the ball. That's not going to happen. And Doyle was playing twice the amount of snaps that Eric Ebron was. They're both going to be involved. Obviously, Ebron's carved himself out a role in that offense, but Doyle has and will be one of the favorites over the middle of the field. I think Uzomah is a good play this week, though. Playing against Kansas City, they've been one of the worst defenses in the league. They're now down their top 2 safeties. Eric Berry he hasn't played all year. He's still recovering from that Achilles injury. He's had some injuries that have latched onto that. So I think Uzomah, I actually went and I played him in cash this week. I went down from Brait because I needed an extra $700 in my DFS cash game lineup. So I went down to Uzomah and he actually played pretty well. So I think that he's a solid add this week in a game where they're definitely going to have to throw a little bit more.
He also is a real good matchup the following week too with Tampa. So a guy you can definitely stick in your lineup and leave him there for a couple of weeks.
All right, guys, we've got a lot of good streamers at DST this week. Let's start with Indianapolis face Buffalo. Pat, is that your top DST streamer as well?
Yeah, it has to be. You're targeting that Buffalo offense week in and week out.
And Allen's hurt, so it's weird to say, but we're getting even better going against them because Peterman's going to start.
Oh, God. And it was just a point bonanza against Peterman at the end of that game yesterday.
Amazing. Tags, you have Buffalo there as well, or is it maybe Atlanta face the Giants, Tampa face Cleveland?
I have the Colts as my number 1 defense against Buffalo. They've allowed at least 8 standard fantasy points in 5 of 6 games now. The lone exception was the game against the Vikings where Kirk Cousins obviously turned the ball over and over in their own territory. But they've allowed, I think it's now 26 sacks through 6 games, if I'm not mistaken, which is just crazy. They've turned the ball over at least twice in 4 of 6 games. There's nothing not to like there. On the flip side, though, you could play the Bills defense against the Colts, too, because Andrew Luck is down 3 starting offensive linemen. His center, Ryan Kelly, is playing through an injury. He's getting hit a lot. Andrew Luck is not scared to throw an interception because he's obviously thrown quite a few of them this year. The Bills defense has been playing fantastic, actually, recently. So
how are they only 3% owned? This is one of the best, 10 or 12 defenses in football.
They're playing fantastic recently. I think people just tied the Bills to bad. And while their offense is bad, their defense has been really, really good. They've had a few breakout performers. The last option I think I have is Detroit.
That's my number 1. I like them even better than Indianapolis.
Yeah, what are the odds after Brock Osweiler having that game against the Bears that he has another good game?
Can he stack 2 good games together?
Lions are coming off the bye. They've got 17 sacks in 5 games this season. Yes! I'm pumped.
At this point, do you want Ryan Tannehill to play or do you prefer Brock Osweiler?
Oh, I want Osweiler to play, man. That's the only reason I've got the Lions. I was going to say there's no other quarterback I'd rather go up against, but Peterman, I think I'd rather go up against than Osweiler. These two are both so horrible.
Yeah, it's not good.
But yeah, Detroit's defense is light years ahead of Indianapolis. All right, guys, let's go with a lightning round of keep or drop, and we'll just go position by position here really quick. Russell Wilson.
For me, he's a keep. I know the passing volume has been really disappointing lately, and I know that's the MO that Seattle wants to have, but it's not going to be like that every game for them, and Russ is still a really, really, really good quarterback.
Tags drop or keep?
Oh, he's a keep, hands down. Guys, don't forget, like in 2017, he scored 190 points from week 9 through week 17, while no other quarterback scored more than 166. In 2016, he was the number 2 quarterback over the second half of the season. He's like he's one that literally gets revved up as the season goes on, and I think we're starting to see that rise. I think we're starting to see them coming into their own as an offense. The defense is lacking. I'm keeping Russell Wilson.
That was back when he ran the ball. He doesn't run the ball anymore, and he was throwing more than 24 passes per game back then too. I'm dropping him.
He's been efficient as a passer.
He's a streamer.
So the thing is his touchdown rate. There are just 3 quarterbacks in football who have a higher touchdown rate than Russell Wilson throwing the ball, and that's Ryan Fitzpatrick, Patrick Mahomes, and Jameis Winston.
Yeah, I think things normalize with the Seahawks run-pass percentage, and once they pass more, he will run the ball more too.
Everyone's been asking about Amari Cooper. We don't even need to answer this. Please keep him. Corey Davis, please keep him. Right? You guys don't disagree, right?
No.
I know they're frustrating.
Yeah, for sure.
For people, but yeah, absolutely you keep him.
What about Nelson Aguilar's? Keep or drop?
Keep.
I agree, you keep him.
I'm dropping him.
I still think he's good. I know the volume has been a little frustrating lately, but I still think he's a good player, and he's a bench guy, but
I'd rather have someone with upside like Tre'Quan Smith or Cortland Sutton.
No, because like the thing is with Tre'Quan, he's still behind Michael Thomas. Cameron Meredith's going to get some work. Alvin Kamara is still involved in the passing game. So if we're expecting, limit like a downturn in volume for Drew Brees, I think that'll flush into it could be like a Devery Henderson type thing. Like we remember Devery Henderson, right? Where it was like he'd have these magical weeks. Like even Brandon Coleman at times had these weeks, and then it's just like he just disappears. And I think that's going to happen with Tre'Quan. He's a fine bench stash, but at the same time, it's not. I don't think he's an every week play. Whereas Aguilar is borderline wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 almost every week.
Jamison Crowder.
Drop.
Yeah, if I drop him for Willie Snead right now.
Okay. Chris Hogan.
Ooh, drop.
I actually just picked him up in a league. a deep league, granted, but
I'd pick him up, I think, so I can't drop him.
He's fourth on that team in snaps now, and he's sharing time with both Philip Dorsett and Cordarrelle Patterson as the number 3. So I think Josh Gordon has emerged as the primary number 1 target outside of Julian Edelman.
I mean, we wanted to own Hogan when he was the number 3 option a couple years ago, right?
I mean, he was a hit or miss type player, and that's fine where he's at.
Yeah, I don't think he's a bad play. Randall Cobb, same kind of guy.
Well, I would say drop just because like he's not playing tonight. It was just announced that he's not going to play tonight. They have their bye next week, so you're going to be without him for the next 2 weeks, and then he comes back. But does he come back a different player? Because he was really bad at the start of the season.
I think he's going to lose his job to Valdez-Scantling. I think he's a better receiver.
What do you think, Pat? You're close to the Packers. I know that's your team. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he just has not been able to stay healthy for long periods at a time. Like, I think if he does stay healthy, he is going to be a guy that, is usable in fantasy, but the days of him being like a 1,000-yard, valuable, no-brainer start every week guy are behind him now. And, Devontae dominates targets there. I think Allison is their second best receiver. So, if you need roster spots freed up, I would be fine with dropping him.
Keelan Cole.
Drop.
And I'm the Keelan Cole dude.
I still think he's their best receiver.
I agree with that, but I don't want to have to worry about playing him.
I don't ever want to start him.
Yeah, fair enough. I can't argue with you guys on that.
Quincy Enunwa.
I think he's droppable.
Yeah.
1 reception in 2 weeks.
Yeah, granted the injury, he had the messed up hand, he's got the hip thing. Plus, I think Sam Darnold is continuing to evolve, and I think Quincy sort of played this role early on where they were drawing up these real simple pitch and catch plays to make things easy for Darnold, and they were going to Enunwa, just short little bubble screens and little hitch routes to just give him an easy completion, let Enunwa see if he can, make something happen after the catch. And, now we're starting to see Robbie Anderson get worked in a little bit more as Darnold's getting confidence to throw into tighter windows and go deeper downfield with his throws. Now with Enunwa dealing with these injuries, I don't think he's a must-keep.
By the way, I forgot to mention 2 wide receivers that I think are also good pickups. Chris Godwin's owned in more than 50% of leagues. But, I mean, I was worried about his snap count. He's back. He led the team in receptions this week. He got his 4th touchdown of the season. He's an awesome receiver. I would put him number 1 ahead of Tre'Quan Smith on my list. Do you guys agree?
With Godwin? Sure.
Yeah, I would have him at number 1.
Yeah. What about Antonio Callaway? I know that, he has not been efficient by any means. He had 2 receptions on 10 targets last week against the Chargers. But he's got 35 targets since they traded Josh Gordon. He's top 15 in the league. Their next 4 weeks, Tampa, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Atlanta. I think you start him all 4 of those weeks.
I mean, start him confidently?
I think so, man. He's probably going to get 8 targets against horrible defenses.
I mean, he has, he's gotten targets. He's catching the ball just 38% of the time. He's been awful. He reminds me of, Zay Jones last year, where there were so many people that had high hopes for him, but he just hasn't panned out. And Mayfield was putting the ball in spots where he should be able to catch it. A lot of those are drops that he hasn't caught. Jarvis Landry's struggling too. I mean, the matchup is really good against the Bucs, so if you're looking for a spot starter for this week, I think the Steelers are starting to turn things around a little bit in their secondary. They've changed some things up, but the Bucs now just fired the defensive coordinator, Mike Smith, today. I don't think they get this defense turned around in 1 week or anything like that. So, I mean, if you need a spot start, Callaway's not the worst Hail Mary option this week.
He can make his weekly fantasy quota for you on 1 catch, too, with that home run speed he has. So, but he is definitely an interesting contrast of, horrendous inefficiency mixed with really attractive opportunity, since there are just so few other wide receivers they have as options there.
All right, guys, let's go a little faster here with running backs. Keep or drop Derrick Henry?
Drop.
Buck Allen?
Drop.
I'd say keep.
Yeah, me too.
I think it's still going to be a near 50-50 split there.
Man, he had a bad week. 1 attempt for 1 yard against the Titans.
He was the 3rd running back for them this week.
Yeah, it was just ugly. Alfred Morris with Matt Breida coming back.
Depends on who you're dropping him for. He's not he's not a must keep or anything like that, but he's also not a must drop.
Agree.
I think he's a keep just because we know that Breida cannot stand up to being a workhorse back. His body is not going to be able to take that. So they're going to need to work Morris on early downs. And I think there's going to be value to that. PPR, you drop him. Standard, you keep him.
All right, last one here, guys. Wendell Smallwood.
Keep.
Yeah, keep, but don't expect too much out of him.
I think so as well. I'm planning on dropping him in 2 weeks, but then again, I didn't pick him up anywhere because I figured Clement was going to be the guy. So, all right, that's all for today's show. Pat, thank you so much for taking the time to come on.
Bobby and Tex, always great to talk to you guys.
And thanks to the sponsors of today's show, Leesa Mattresses, where you can get $160 off your mattress order at leesa.com/fantasypros. And thanks to Roman, you can go to getroman.com/fantasypros. That's getroman.com/fantasypros for a free online ED visit. From Mike Tegliere, I'm Bobby Sylvester. Thanks for listening and enjoy your football.
I just wanted you to watch me